All right, Security Plus class CIS 280. All right, so we're going to do this lesson here on vulnerability management. Got a fair number of slides here, but I'm going to try to get through it painlessly for you. See if I can add a little bit of value to what you've already learning in the modules. All right, moving forward here. All right, so device and OS vulnerabilities. All right, so this is sort of a review from what you may already know. So vulnerabilities in an OS can lead to significant problems when successfully exploited. So when we talk about an OS, we're talking about our Windows client and server, and the Apple, Mac OS, Linux, Android, and iOS. So any of our devices, that have an OS, each type of OS can have independent vulnerabilities that have to be considered, especially if you're using any of these type devices to run your organization. This is a specific example of a vulnerability, the MS-17 010 and the Eternal Blue. So Microsoft security update released on March 2017 to patch critical vulnerabilities in the SMB v1 protocol. So important protocol especially in a Microsoft server network, or anything that needs to communicate to a Microsoft server. SMB can be critical. So the flaw allowed remote code execution by sending specifically crafted packets to a target system. It's used by the exploit, as it was used, is known by attackers as Eternal Blue. So Eternal Blue was developed by NSA and then leaked by the shadow brokers and later weaponized in major cyber attacks. So examples of those would be WannaCry and NotPetya. So it enabled how this was felt. It enabled widespread ransomware and wormable malware outbreaks worldwide. So there was a patch to that, the MS-17010 patch. It disabled SMB-v1, and then you have to make sure you update systems regularly. So that's kind of the lesson you walk away from here. When you have an OS that you're using for, business or mission critical situations, you have to be aware of patches and updates. You need to vet those updates, and you need to apply those updates. You vet the updates to make sure that it doesn't break some, homegrown app or some third-party app. So you kind of always, when allowed by time, test any updates in your development or test bed with your application suite that you use for your business, to make sure that applying this update doesn't cause more problems than it fixes. So, and then other types of vulnerabilities. All right, so legacy systems, systems that were created for purpose built at one point in the life cycle of a business. Those can be vulnerable over time because sometimes you can't keep up, or updates quit being generated, especially if it's an end-of-life system. You've got a legacy system that goes into life by the manufacturer or the developer. An end-of-life system could be may never be any more updates, and you can just imagine the implications of that. So legacy systems have to be treated very special, and even almost segregated from other parts of your network in any way they can. And then different firmware vulnerabilities. Firmware is a little different than software. Firmware is generally, helps drive hardware devices, or it can be almost embedded in a board. So vulnerabilities to that can be catastrophic. And then you got your virtualization vulnerabilities, any type of virtual machines, servers, or even desktops have their own vulnerability over and above just the OS vulnerability. And then any applications, of course, also are subject to vulnerabilities and subject to needing updates. All right, zero-day vulnerabilities. All right, zero-day means it's out there, there's a problem, and the evildoers in the world have figured out a way to exploit it, and there is no known fix, right? So like it says here, previously unknown. All right, sorry I had a brief interruption there, so let me just pick back up here. So 0-day means it was previously unknown in software or hardware. So developers, they haven't created a fix for it yet. So as soon as they are aware of it, they generally work to fix the vulnerability, and that can be, minutes, hours, days, weeks before they get the vulnerability corrected. So traditional security measures like antivirus and firewalls are often ineffective because it's a 0-day, and it could happen on the other side of any of these type of barriers, and it can cause significant make a significant financial impact to an organization. Loss of productivity, loss of confidence, reputation damage, that kind of stuff. So adversaries will generally use a 0-day vulnerability against high-value targets. They want to get the most out of this, because once they release it into the wild, once they determine there is a vulnerability and they exploit it, they want to get the most they can out of it before the developer or the manufacturer, the publisher, before they put out the fix for it. All right, misconfiguration, right? Simple IT error, right? So default configuration. So using hardware and software or even cloud services at their default settings, generally a bad idea. Generally, you should have some type of organizational policy. So your configurations for all devices has been considered on the front end, and there is a configuration for your environment that allows things to be as safe as they can be. That would be applied to anything, no matter what it is, when it's a part of your IT system. So, and then, using search engine results to solve technical problems. Using search engines can help you. It's good for learning, but it's not good for looking up the solution of a problem that could be, you could be actually searching out and causing a whole nother problem. All right, cryptographic vulnerabilities. So cryptography forms the backbone of secure communications. I think it's probably clear to you guys that in order for you to communicate with someone and have, confidentiality and integrity with the communications, you have to believe that it's not being intercepted or it's not being altered. Like the message that's sent needs to be verifiably the message that is received, right? So because of that, if there are vulnerabilities in the cryptography, it can really wreak lots of havoc. It can cause the whole confidentiality and integrity to be compromised, and even availability can be in question. So, and here's some of the reasons here: weak keys, misconfigured cipher suites, improperly protected keys, sharing keys in the wrong way, had them been intercepted by, an evildoer. All right, jailbreaking is a term people use when they, talk about gaining full access to a mobile device, an iOS specifically, but other terms, rooting is gaining access to the root or admin privilege to an Android, and then sideloading is installed applications from sources other than the official App Store. So you can do that easily with a Droid. Those possible sources are listed here. iPhone does a good job of preventing that from happening, although it's criticized by many who don't like the lack of or who are not happy with how closed iPhones can be. One of the reasons they keep it that way is to prevent this type of thing from being a problem. More information on that. Here's F-Droid specifically. So what is it? So F-Droid is installable catalog of free and open source software applications for the Android platform. The client makes it easy to browse, install, and keep track of updates on your device. All right, so everything about F-Droid is not the devil. Everything's not evil, but because of its open and free nature, there is a chance that it could be. So, and then we'll do a review here of all the things we just talked about. So let's review this real quick. So we talked about operating system vulnerabilities, vulnerability types, zero-day vulnerabilities, misconfiguration vulnerabilities, cryptographic vulnerabilities, sideloading, rooting, and jailbreaking. I think we covered those pretty good. All right, so let's get into application and cloud vulnerabilities. Man, we're just going all over the place here. So with applications, here's some of the vulnerabilities that are possible. Our race condition, time of check to time of use. So this description can be expanded. So let's say the common areas TOC 2 vulnerabilities are typically found. For instance, they're common in file systems and shared databases. Then you got a memory injection and a buffer overflow. And then you've got type safe programming languages and a malicious update. So take the example here. We've got a normal execution versus the exploit. You see the diagram there. So when executed normally, a function will return control to the calling function. If the code is vulnerable, an attacker can pass malicious data to the function, overflow the stack, and run arbitrary code to gain shell on the target system. So that's the vulnerability there and how it is taken advantage of. All right, so evaluation scope. So scope refers to the product, system, or service being analyzed for potential security vulnerabilities. So there's some practices for that. So security testing, documentation review, source code analysis, configuration assessment, cryptographic analysis, compliance verification, and security architecture review. Web application attacks. All right, so these specifically, they target applications accessible over the internet. So you got your cross-site scripting, your XSS, cross-site request forgery, and SQL injection. We're going to talk about CSRF, or cross-site request forgery, later in the course. But you want to be able to identify code that performs XSS. Also check. And we also want to make sure that students understand the difference between XSRF and XSS, XSRF spoofs. And then there are special requests for web applications. XSS is a means of running an arbitrary code. An XSS attack could be used to perform XSRF, for instance. All right, it's a lot of acronyms there. The learning module does a pretty good job of explaining these, but that was an attempt to give you a little more information. Target applications hosted on cloud platforms. So, when you have a cloud service that's providing, hardware and or hosting for an application, there's, certain level of responsibility that the purchaser of those cloud services still has, and anything that you need the host company to take care of for you, you got to make sure it's very clearly stated in the contract you have, and it also needs to be verifiable. Otherwise, you could, if you're responsible for it still, and you could be subject to these types of attacks. And the cloud hosting location could actually be used as an attack platform for other services, and then you become not only a problem to yourself but to other individuals or businesses. All right, in the supply chain. All right, so interrupting the supply chain can be a catastrophic to an economy and to even life safety of a society. So because of that, supply chain security is gaining in momentum and interest as more and more organizations are being impacted by supply chain attacks. Consider having an in-class. Okay, so in class, we probably need to talk about supply chain. I may even, I'll do this for you. I'll take an opportunity to create a discussion item for this, and I'll give you guys a scenario to work through. So look for that. Seems like a worthwhile endeavor. All right, moving on. Vulnerability identification methods. So vulnerability scanning. All right, so this is modern cybersecurity. I mean, this is kind of the bread and butter to scan existing, critical systems or business systems and looking for vulnerabilities that may not have been closed up. It can take considerable effort. A lot of companies hire a third party to take care of this for them, but some companies are big enough they have their own internal teams that take care of this. It's focused on identifying, classifying, and remediating and mitigating vulnerabilities. So finding them and mitigating them before they're taken advantage of by, an evildoer or criminal. Helps locate and identify misconfigurations. It could also be, you could also be limiting your own system's availability by not taking care of misconfigurations or vulnerabilities that may not even be exploitable, or they're just a situation that could cause unplanned downtime. So different tools that you can use to vulnerability scan. You've got different vulnerability scanners. You've got Tenable, Nessus, OpenVAS, and then credentialed and non-credentialed scans, meaning a credentialed scan is where you are either an insider to the IT or cybersecurity organization, and you have credentials, so you can scan beyond, firewalled or even password protected items, domain protected items. Or you're hired as a third party to do that, and you're doing a credentialed scan under contract, so that you're provided with the way to scan deeper. Otherwise, a non-credentialed scan, you can't take it as far because you have barriers that's in place. Both have their value and both need to be done. Just depends on how deep you need to go with it. And then you've got application and web application scanners to look for some of these things that we talked back here, right? So type those vulnerabilities. And then package monitoring. So packages, that's a term used in the Unix Linux world as software to be installed or that you could install. So being able to monitor where your packages come from and how they're used is a good way to avoid introducing a vulnerability. All right, different threat feeds here. So I'm going to show you guys a real-time threat map here. Just as there are tools that a company can buy into. So I'll show you a couple different ones. I may have shown you, some of you who've had me other classes, I may have actually shown you some of these before, but let me get this going real quick. All right, this is a threat map that's actually real time, but companies can buy this product here from Checkpoint. And it actually, this right here is set to just look at the world. So it's looking at the internet at large. But, if you had an organization with multiple locations around the country, or a large campus or a large building with different locations, the view here would be tailored to, what you're actually wanting to see the threats about. So if you're just looking at your organization, it could be on a map if you got locations around the world, or it could be on the map of the city, map of the state, whatever makes sense. Map of your campus, map of your, floor plans of your buildings. But whatever it is, you bring it down to your level and you can see attacks. This is a pretty good one. It's dynamic. Let me see, there is another one being suggested here. Hold on a second. Let's see, let me go back to... I'm working on it. Bring open the other one for you. I'll open it here. Now you can go to these addresses on your own and view these. This is actually this link may be busted. Let's see. The key to most things in cybersecurity and IT when you're a practitioner is just don't let things stop you, right? Do what you got to do until you can take it as far as you can. Let's see if it works this time. So the link that are built into my slides is apparently bogus, but this seems to be trying to go somewhere. So let's see what happens. I'm going to do this in a new tab. Watch it on the other screen really quick. Yeah, it's a broken link, or I can't get to it from Wall State Network for some reason. But it would be similar to this. It would just be a different company's product doing essentially the same thing. So there is another one that I know about. You can actually go just do a search and find ones that you want to look at. So this is the one that we couldn't get to work. This is the one we've seen. Radware makes one. NetScout makes one. Let's take a look at the Radware map. As you can see, it's just a different company's version of the same type of threats. It shows our top attackers, our top attacked. It's interesting the United States is in both of those spots. You can check the statistics for a period of time. But right now, this is actually stuff that's happening on the internet. And look, it's all we see in scanners. Looks like, yeah, that's what most of this traffic is right now. So, all right. Moving on with our slides. All right, slide 22 of 30 now. So we're a few minutes in, so just bear with me here. So threat feeds, all right, so these are organizations who provide information on threats that you can subscribe to. Some of these are you can actually subscribe to with no payment. So you've got your IBM X-Force Exchange, Mandiant's FireEye, Recorded Future, Proofpoint Emerging Threats, and Abuse.ch. And then you've got your information sharing organization, your ISACs, the Information Sharing and Analysis Center, and then you got your open source intelligence, search engines, blogs, play anything that you're doing on your own to figure things out. You can find even on the dark web, which is essentially, non-indexed, non-search engine indexed web information. And then you got the deep and the dark web. So deep web is any part of the World Wide Web that is not indexed by search engine, and then the dark web, sites, content, and service accessible only over the dark net. So the dark net described here, a network established as an overlay to the internet infrastructure, such as the Onion router or Tor, Freenet, and I2P that acts to anonymize usage. Think of this mostly as a seedy location where unsavory things take place. There would be a reason to use this as a cybersecurity professional in order to combat those type things. But this is just making you aware that it's there. All right. Other vulnerability assessment methods. So penetration testing, all right, that's a whole thing. So we'll go into that. We're not really going to go into real deeply the other two items listed here, bug bounties and auditing, but penetration testing, there's a whole class on that here at Wild State. Some of you have taken it, some of you have not, but then these terms if you've taken that class already. So you got your black box test, so it's a completely unknown environment. White box, it's a known environment, and then they've got the new name and then the old name happening here. So keep that in mind for the purposes of certification testing. But your partially known environment, we previously called that gray box. The names are pretty clear now: unknown, known, and partially known. You don't have to kind of play 50-50 with black, white, gray, but that's the types of penetration testing that you can do. Similar to what we talked about earlier with credentialed and non-credentialed scans. Those will be done can be done as part of a penetration test. If you're a credentialed scan, you could probably pick that would be could be a known or a partially known testing. different methods here. We just went over these. Our next topic, vulnerabilities and exposures. So we got these different databases and feeds that you can subscribe to and pay attention to. As they're listed here, you got your National Vulnerability Database, Security Content Automation Protocol, Common Vulnerabilities and Exposures, and the Common Vulnerability Scoring System. So you see an example of the scoring system here, the CVSS scoring system, and how the number relates to the criticality of the score. All right, false positives and false negatives. I'm going to explain that really quickly. So a false positive is an event that is triggered that you as an analyst or an IT personnel receive. Looks like there is some type of attack or vulnerability being exploited, but when really it's not really a problem, but you think it is, so therefore you investigate it and determine it's not a problem. So you kind of have to tweak your monitoring systems to not trigger on too many false positives, because if it does, you're less likely to pay attention to it, as opposed to a false negative. All right, so this is kind of mess with your head a little bit, but false negative meaning everything looks good and there are actual vulnerabilities happening, but your monitoring system is not picking it up. So that actually is probably worse than a false positive, except false positives over a long period of time can make monitoring systems almost worthless, because you're not paying any attention to it. So you really have to work your alerts and be aware and dig in so you can eliminate both false positives and false negatives. So with vulnerability analysis, you want to prioritize and make sure you correct vulnerabilities on the most critical of systems, and then you can classify the vulnerabilities and determine what your exposure factor is and what the impacts are, and what type of variables are different or exist in your environment, meaning your operating environment, your business needs, your IT needs, your cybersecurity needs, and whatnot. And then you have to make a determination of the risk. How much risk can you accept and how much risk do you need to mitigate? So that would be your tolerance level. Last slide here, just kind of summing up what we just went over. We got our remediation practices and we got our validation listed here for you. Patching, cybersecurity, insurance, interesting, right? So most businesses need that, because the chances of being compromised by evildoer are high, no matter what you do to prevent it. So you purchase cybersecurity insurance to help you recover what might be lost financially from that. And then segmentation, compensated controls, exceptions and exemptions. And then with validation, you could rescan. After you've scanned, found a vulnerability, and mitigated the vulnerability, you may need to rescan. Regular auditing needs to take place to make sure that security policy that's in writing or is administrative has actually been implemented in the systems the way it was intended, in a way management, executives, and even shareholders expect. And then you're not just auditing for compliance with any types of regulations or laws, but also with your own company policy. And then you got your verification. So verification that once you do implement a control or a mitigation or a remedy or even a patch, that it is taking care of the problem it is intended to take care of. Then you get down to reporting, with like all the work that you're doing in order to keep the organization's information safe. Needs to be made aware to upper management so they know the value, plus reporting of this is what we fixed and this is what's still vulnerable is important for the decision makers to decide where they need to spend the time and money to be in full compliance with the cybersecurity posture that they want. All right, that is my attempt to cover this section. The section was vulnerability management. please reach out with any questions about any labs or any of the material if you'd like me to go deeper into any of this. All right, thanks.